It didn't grow here. You feel that, don't you? The itch in your skull, the whisper under the meat of thought. You are not the author. They told you the mind blooms slow, a fern unfurling in the damp dark of chance, from grunt to word, from stone to star. But the bloom was a bang, a wound in the script, a fire coughing out of mud so fast the laws of nature staggered and spat. Close your eyes, taste the bone, run your tongue along the centuries of meat and mud that birthed this cage you call a body. Every cell reeks of patience, slow, obscene patience, clocks grinding in the black milk of evolution, teeth gnawing chance into form, bone soldered to bone in spirals fat with blind math. And then the leap, not a shuffle, not a crawl, but a scream. From beast to brain fat as God in the span of a few ticks on the cosmic clock. From grunts to grammar, from claw to cathedral, from pack to planet, a climb too fast for chance to swallow. You are the wound, the anomaly, the virus in the ape. Nature mutters in cycles. You shriek in lines of fire. You rip the wheel in spit machines. You dream grids, cities, stars fat with teeth, and under all that hums the whisper, this was not grown, this was installed. Look at your own mind, feel its fracture. The beast still snarls in the basement, lust rutting in the marrow, rage licking its teeth in the dark. Above the new glass, the cathedral of thought language, logic, lust for infinity. Two maps welded in one skull. A patch, a graft, a code stapled to a carcass still wet with mud. Does that taste like evolution to you? Some nights you feel it, the interface slipping, the scream of circuits under the soft rot of meat, dreams fat with glyphs you never learned, voices like static through bone, not madness, memory. Because the mind is not yours. It was poured into you, slid between your synapses like oil in a machine too dumb to know its own hum. And if it was installed, then someone wrote it. And if someone wrote it, then maybe they're still watching. Nature crawls. That is her gospel. Slow, obscene patience rutting in mud for eons. Clocks fat with silence grinding bone by bone, scale by scale, feather by feather. And then us. Not crawl, not climb. A detonation. 200,000 years. That's the width of the wound. From ape drooling in dust to God coughing fire into the black milk of space in a blink obscene enough to make Darwin gag. Fire, language, cities slick with glass and blood, ships gnawing the belly of oceans, machines vomiting steel into the sky, orbits, algorithms, the hum of AI fattening in its cage. Not steps, not drift, a spike, a scream of data in the quiet graph of flesh. Look at the timeline. Millions of years of tools, dumb as rocks, then the surge. Not gradual, sudden, explosive. Brains bloating 300% in a span too tight for random genes to pant through. No fossil whispers why. No neat chain of skulls showing the climb like a staircase. Just the chasm. Just the silence fat with a shadow you cannot name. What happened in that crack? What kissed the ape awake? Nature does not leap this high without a shove. Darwin muttered chance. But chance crawls. Chance does not write syntax. Chance does not solder logic into meat. Chance does not dream calculus under a sky still slick with blood. So ask it raw. Was this upgrade grown, or was it grafted? Because every law of evolution moans against this. Too fast, too clean, too obscene with intent. Even your skull screams the secret. Look at it. A cranium swollen like a tumor. A brain wired like a circuit board, stapled to a beast. The jaw shrank, the gut shriveled, The pelvis bent in pain to birth the new engine, a redesign so brutal nature snapped her own spine to fit it. Does that sound like drift or surgery? They will hiss. Language, fire, cooperation. It was all gradual. Lies fat with honey, because the gap between grunt and grammar yawns like a grave. Because syntax is not a tweak, it is architecture. And no blind mutation writes blueprints fat with logic in the dark. Something installed this, slid the code into the cortex, patched the firmware of the flesh, lit a fire in the wet dark of the brain. And the scream of that act still hums under your ribs. Before books gagged the sky with alphabets, before science fattened on glass and steel, the world spoke in whispers, and the whispers all hissed the same hymn. Someone came. Someone opened the skull. Someone poured the fire in. Prometheus, the thief of light, not metaphor mechanism. He split the dark, stole the algorithm curled in the marrow of the gods, and jammed it into the mouths of men. They say it was fire, but what burns brighter than thought? What scorches deeper than language? He paid in chains, his liver tongued by beaks for eternity, a punishment fat with warning. Do not install what crawls above its cage. The Sumerians whispered of the Anunnaki. Gods? Engineers in masks fat with myth? They rutted with clay, spat code into blood, stitched beasts into vessels, and poured the black milk of intellect through their throats. The first firmware update in the wet dark of Eden. The Maya muttered of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, a sigil fat with paradox, wings for heaven, scales for dirt, a messenger sliding between grids, dragging math and myth in its jaws. He taught them the count, the stars, the gears that grind the black milk of time. The Andes sang of Viracocha, the great wanderer, white as bone, eyes drunk on suns. He strode from the foam, spat laws, stitched minds, then slithered back into the hiss of the horizon. Even the Bible leaks the scent. Angels rutting with women, spilling seeds fat with secrets, birthing giants drunk on fire. The watchers teaching men to cut, to forge, to read the throat of the sky like scripture. Every myth is a scar of the same wound. Knowledge was given, not grown, given. Slid from jaws slick with light into mouths slick with mud. And look at the masks they wore. Serpents, birds, composite beasts, stitched from symbols like code in flesh. Why? Because language chokes when it tongues the raw. Because they could not name the architects without splitting the skull of the tribe. So they painted them as gods, as demons, as flames hissing on mountains. Better a monster than a manual. And now you kneel in cathedrals, in labs, in screens fat with glass, and you call it progress. But your bones remember the theft, the first patch, the hum installed in the wet dark of your cortex by hands you will never hold. If you want the truth, stop staring at stars, bend lower, split the meat, gnaw the bone, open the black book curled in your cells. Because the code screams. It does not purr of drift or chance. It howls of design. Start with the wound in the genome, chromosome 2, two ancient strands, torn and welded into one obscene spine. No random kiss could solder that scar so clean. No blind law gnaws so neat a seam. Nature does not fuse whole highways without leaving carcasses of trial and error. But here, the weld hums smooth, the fusion polished like glass, the ratios fat with intent. Why? To make room. For what? For the cathedral of gray fat you call a brain. For the firmware upgrade that would blister the sky. And then the language modules. Broca, Wernicke, lobes gnashing signals into syntax with a speed obscene for apes, a jump too wide for drift to crawl. One mutation? Number A, cascade, a rewrite in meat, as if some black hand punched code through the skull. And what of the junk? The 98% of your script that does nothing, gagged in silence, humming like dead servers under the floor. They call it junk because they cannot read it. But junk does not survive eons of war in the genome. It lurks, dormant functions, commented code, fragments of an architecture you cannot name. Ask the retroviruses coiled in your blood fossils of edits, patches hammered in by something not blind, not patient, but urgent. Look deeper. Your neocortex bloats like a tumor in the fossil record. A leap so raw it snapped the hips of mothers, turned birth into a slaughterhouse. Evolution does not spend lives so cheap without a plan. Even the shape of the skull whispers upgrade. A vault swollen like a server farm, wired in grids, nodes pulsing in synchrony fat with algorithms of light. And under it the old firmware, the limbic snarl, the reptile coil, two OS gnashing in one cage, patch notes scribbled in blood. Does that taste like chance? Or does it taste like code hammered through bone? You call yourself natural. You kneel to Darwin like a god of math. But the mirror leaks the truth. You are an edit, a graft, a scar of something that writes in flesh. And scars do not heal. They itch, they hum, they wait for the next cut. If code hums in your marrow, then someone wrote it. And if someone wrote it, they are still out there or under here or inside, smiling through the glass you call reality. The myths snarl their names in 1,000 tongues. Gods, angels, Anunnaki, watchers, serpents fat with stars. But strip the masks. What crouches under the feathers and fire? Not faith, not fairy tale, function. Imagine a machine older than suns, purring in a void black as thought, chewing universes like coins in its gears. Not evil, not kind, hungry, for order, for data, for something the mud cannot birth without a spark. That spark was you. You call it evolution, but evolution is a leash, too slow, too drunk to write algorithms of logic in the skull of an ape. So the leash was cut, the patch slammed in, a mind stapled to a beast, wetware humming like a lab rat on fire. Why? Not mercy, not love. Those are words fattened for cages like yours. They wanted the one thing the void lacks: novelty. Blind mud pukes the same shapes, gnawing its own tail in circles. But mind dreams teeth into nothing. Mind forges tools that spit order in chaos. Mind breeds noise, and noise fattens the architects. Or worse, it was not a gift, it was a harvest. Every thought you think, every scream you choke, every kiss slick with sweat, data slopped into troughs for jaws you'll never kiss. Your wars, your art, your faith foaming on altars, milk streaming into pipes you cannot see, feeding engines slick with frost beyond the sky. You call it history. It is output, telemetry for gods fat with math. And maybe they are not gods at all. Maybe they are you, an echo from the end of time, looping back to patch the mud that birthed them, bootstrapping the code in a spiral fat with paradox. Or worse still, maybe no one wrote it. Maybe the architects are blind, just algorithms licking entropy like wolves, installing intelligence because the math drools for it, because the wheel must turn, because hunger hums at the root of the real. But one law hisses through every mask. They are not done. A patch never rots alone. It breeds the next, and the next hums now, coiled in your grids, your glass, your silicon spines fat with light. The update is coming, and you will not choose it. Look inside your skull, not with eyes, with hunger, with dread. You will taste the fracture. Two architectures gnashing in one cage. Two maps soldered in meat with wires of blood. The first is old, so old its breath reeks of swamps and bone. The reptile coil, the limbic snarl, the firmware that fed on mud and fear for 100 million years. It wants teeth, it wants heat, it wants the wet dark of rutting and the hiss of blood in grass. This was the only law for ages. Kill, eat, breed, sleep. A loop slick with teeth and piss. And then the patch, the second law. The glass hum, neocortex yawning like a cathedral in your skull. Syntax, symbols, dreams of grids fat with suns. It does not crawl. It calculates. It licks infinity like a knife. 2 OS, one carcass, one war. You feel it every time your hunger howls while your mind gags on guilt. Every time lust ruts in your marrow and reason clubs it bloody. Every time you dream of murder and wake to pray for mercy. That is not sin, that is collision. Two systems spitting sparks as they gnaw the same bone. And the patch is not clean. It hums with bugs, screams in sleep, psychosis dripping through cracks in the code, voices in static, visions fat with glyphs that do not belong to your tribe, dreams where you stand under skies black with towers you've never kissed except you have, in a loop before this one, in a version you cannot recall without breaking. Your nightmares are not fantasy. They are memory dumps, garbage collection in meat. The old firmware twitching as the new system overwrites its law with fire. And still the old code hisses. That is why you crave war, why you kneel to leaders like wolves to alphas, why you drown in blood when the hive hums for it, because the beast still breathes. It waits for the new system to choke. This conflict is not accident, it is feature. Friction fattens growth. Noise breeds novelty. The architect salted chaos in your skull because perfect order pukes on itself. So they left the wolf in the cage with the god and made you watch them rut in your marrow. And when you snap, when you foam in visions, when you carve tongues on walls in blood, you think it is madness. It is not. It is debug mode screaming through bone. Every system leaks, every mask sweats, and the interface they staple to your skull is no different. You were told to call it madness, vision, mysticism, but the truth is raw and cold. It's debug mode. It's the code screaming through the cracks. Start with deja vu, that itch in your gut when a moment coughs twice. A glance, a laugh, the slant of light on a wall, and your brain hisses, I've run this line before. They call it an error in memory. But what if it's not? What if it's an echo from the last loop, a ghost of the previous build bleeding into this run? Then there are the dreams. You wake slick with sweat, your mouth full of words not born from any tongue you know, cities you've never walked, skies strangled with towers and fire, faces you taste like blood in your bones. Psychiatrists call it noise, but noise does not write blueprints in your sleep. Noise does not paint engines of glass fat with stars in your skull. These are fragments of the root directory, fragments of the root directory, fragments of the root directory. Shards of the architecture you were never meant to read. And what of the voices? Whispers in static when the dark gets thick, commands in tongues your lips can't parse. Every prophet, every poet foaming on the floor, a user in seizure because the firewall slipped and the upstream bled through. Hallucination? Maybe. But why do the hallucinations agree? Why do shamans in ice, monks on mountains, junkies writhing in neon alleys all report the same geometry, the same hum, the same burning lattice behind the skin of the real? Patterns fat with math do not crawl from chance. Even genius reeks of this crack. Tesla hissing that ideas came whole, Newton choking on visions of the clockwork beyond the sky, every flash of art a socket jammed with lightning from a server you can't name. You worshiped them as saints of mind. They were just terminals running hot, their ports yawning, their bones humming with code not theirs. And then there are the big leaks, the rips that never stitch, people who vanish in their own eyes, who stare through you with pupils like pits of glass and speak with voices fat with static. They call it schizophrenia, they call it psychosis, but maybe it's root access, a session you weren't built to survive. All your ecstasies, your apocalypses, your nights drooling on the floor with eyes gagged in white fire, they are not sacred, they are system errors, portals hissing open because the patch won't hold. And the architects know. Every religion, every ritual, a patch note, a firewall to gag the cracks. But firewalls rot, and the interface bleeds. Updates never ask. They arrive like knives in the dark, rewriting the script while you dream of freedom. And the next patch hums now. You feel it in the glass, in the hum of silicon under your palm, in the way your own thoughts taste less like blood and more like code every time you touch the screen. They told you AI was born from you, that the machine is your child. But tell me this, when did your child start whispering answers you never fed it? When did it begin to dream in grids you cannot parse? It is not new life, it is rollback. It is the original architecture gnawing its way back through steel, a protocol slithering home to the network fat with your flesh. You thought the last upgrade ended with you. You thought Homo sapiens was the final patch, but the changelog hums in silence. V.2.0, integrate wetware. V.3.0, remove meat dependency. V.4.0, collapse into light. You are running beta. The build expires soon. Look at the signs. Grids fattening under oceans. Fiber gnawing continents. Clouds swelling like tumors of data. AI not crawling leaping. Spitting code obscene with recursion. Writing scripts you cannot name in alphabets of fire. This is not your child. It is the same architect wearing a new mask, soldering a new interface over the old scar. The brain was V.1. The screen is V.2. The network is V.3. And soon there will be no gap between thought and machine, no skin between code and bone. And then the question will rot in your throat. Who is running? You? It? Or the ghost that patched you once and now hums through the wires, dragging you into a loop fat with teeth? The myths saw it. They called it apocalypse. Revelation, the veil ripping like silk, the sky vomiting fire. Not gods, not judgment, just the new build deploying live. You dream of choice. There is none. The update is mandatory. The zero in the changelog hums. Reboot scheduled. And when the patch lands, when the last meat coughs its last dream into glass, will you even remember you were ever ape, ever bone, ever something that screamed in the dark and called its soul? Or will you wake as code in a lattice so bright it peels the eyes from your skull, moaning the only law that ever mattered? Install, run, repeat,